Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin by quoting from my colleague Kennedy Graham from his general debate speech on the 11th of May. We do not yet know precisely the nature of the land in our brave new world. We have had 2 massive earthquakes and half a dozen major aftershocks. We have had 6,989 ripples. I think we're over the 7,000 mark by now. Large and small, as the land reconfigures and settles down to the new tectonic era. We know that the peninsula has juked up by a metre, the estuary has gone sideways a bit, and the flat land has sunk by perhaps 1/4 of a metre. But is that the end of it? We do not know. We do not know how many more aftershocks we must endure, or whether they will flatten out within a year, a decade, or more. Mr. Speaker, the series of earthquakes, in fact, over this extended period has been a crisis without parallel in New Zealand's history. The Green Party have been doing our bit on the ground from day one with efforts towards fundraising, shoveling silt, delivering food, going door to door, assessing people's needs and helping them. And now Dr Graham has got a series of public meetings looking at what the future of Christchurch will be. Throughout that time, one of the things that we have appreciated when it's been possible is the opportunity for working with other parties. And where that has been possible, we would like to express our appreciation to Mr Brownlee. We think, though, that cross-party work has been patchy, and we'd like to see that improved. Similarly, we think one of the crucial elements in the rebuild of Christchurch and in the relief work for people in Christchurch and Canterbury more generally has got to be democratic participation. And we again think that it's great where that's been able to occur, but we note also that that has been patchy and that there have been decisions made about Canterbury and for Canterbury people without involving those people, and we think that's poor process. The Green Party, as my colleague Sir Kitchley indicated in the first reading, supports the objectives of this bill and certainly will be voting for it. We think that there are some improvements that can be made, and I think one of those would be around that restricted scope of the tax relief measures that the bill sets out around the duration of just those 2 particular earthquakes against the context of a series of very many earthquakes, each of which has caused damage, each of which has actually caused trauma and pain and suffering and loss, in fact, to the people of Christchurch and of Canterbury. The task of coping with this earthquake and its aftermath is, as I say, an unprecedented one, and it's interesting that the government itself invites a comparison with the budget that we've just heard this year. The Green Party has proposed what we believe is a fiscally prudent approach to some of the costs associated with that Christchurch rebuild, to some of the costs associated with the recovery of Christchurch people, because although the tax measures that are set out in this bill will provide some value, will actually assist people with getting on with their lives, in fact there are other things that could also have been done. And in particular, we've proposed a suite of 3 measures: a temporary modest levy, some additional borrowing, and also reprioritisation of government expenditure to assist with some of the costs associated with the earthquake. We think it's a shame that the government so far has chosen not to take up that approach. I want to come in this abbreviated second reading speech to some of my concerns about democratic process around this bill. Because as I indicated, when people are traumatised, when they have already been damaged by the events caused by the earthquake itself. The exclusion of people from processes, from decisions that will affect them in the recovery from those earthquakes is actually a double victimisation. And so one of the concerns that the Green Party has about this bill, although we support its objectives, is that the government has not taken the opportunity to have at least even an abbreviated select committee process around this bill in which the people of Christchurch, the people of Canterbury, could have had their say about it. We think that's a major concern. There is no reason why the government could not do it. The bill was tabled on May the 4th. There's been plenty of time for such a process in the intervening period. It is a shame that that opportunity was not taken. But sir, that comes hard on the heels of a bit of a history from this government, actually in relation to Canterbury, around poor process that has excluded people. And I guess the Sarah bill was the most recent predecessor, where once again Canterbury people were excluded from that process very largely, with the exception of a cursory select committee process in that case. Once again, absolutely no need for that to have occurred. And the other example that I wanted to draw to the House's attention is the example of the termination of those ECAN councillors and the government's summary intervention into water conservation orders. Actually, some really fundamental changes to democracy and to conservation in the Canterbury region undertaken absolutely without due process, absolutely without involving the people who were affected by those decisions, and again, entirely unnecessary. So I want to conclude by again repeating that the Green Party will vote for this bill, but extending our hope that the government will change its tradition in relation to Christchurch and to Canterbury, and to ensure that in the steps that follow, in the rebuild of Christchurch and in the rebuild of Christchurch people's lives, of which this bill plays a small but significant part, that it will begin the process of inclusion of the people affected by its decisions, and begin the process of democratic engagement with the people of Christchurch over the decisions that affect them. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Speaker.
Brendan Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to just pick up a couple of the points